All right, welcome back. So in this new section, we're talking about navs and nav bars, and we're also throwing in a little bit of Flexbox, and we're talking about making responsive nav bars. So there's some new stuff that will come up. We're going to talk about the Flexbox utilities, so don't skip that. I just want to start by saying that nav bars are really commonly used, and they're one of the things that Bootstrap makes really easy. It's pretty easy to make a button on your own. You don't need Bootstrap to do that for you. But it's a huge pain to make a responsive nav bar that toggles, has the hamburger icon, that drops down correctly. It's a lot of work if you don't use Bootstrap. So because of that, I know a lot of people who actually use Bootstrap mainly for the nav bar and the grid system, which we haven't gotten to yet. So this is important stuff, and I want to start by saying we're talking about navs right off the bat, which are actually separate from nav bars. So nav bar is like this thing up top. That usually there's only one per page. It contains a lot more information, different links, sometimes a form, and often it stays at the top. But we've also got navs, and these are just more general navigation, general components that you could use anywhere on your page. You might just have like a little about section somewhere where people could toggle through different tabs, and that's a nav. It doesn't have to be the top. And in fact, a lot of the markup we're going to learn around plain navs also comes into play with nav bars. Okay, so let's just start by talking about navs. So here's the basic markup. If you want to make a nav like this one here, you need to have class nav, nav item, and nav link. So each one of these is a link. And this one has a disabled class on it. This one has an active class. And the active one, they make a point of telling you it should look any different, doesn't do anything in this base nav class. But later on, when we look at things like tabs, right here, when you make something active, it does clearly have a different look to it. When you are working with pills, which we'll also talk about, you make something active and it gets this highlight. So just because it doesn't have a purpose right here doesn't mean it's useless. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I have a new file. It's empty, doesn't have anything in it. I'm going to start by making a UL with a class of nav. And then inside of that, I'm going to have an LI for each item and give it a class of nav item, and then an anchor tag with a class of nav link. And then whatever I put in here, I'll just do something like first and duplicate that a couple times and save. I'm going to rename them. Hang on. There we go. Rename them. And let's maybe make one of them disabled just to show you, and make another one active also to show you it doesn't do anything. So this is now a nav up here. I can, shrink it and make it larger. And it's not that exciting, honestly. We will talk about positioning them, spreading things out, putting them in the middle, the right, the left, making them vertical. In the next video, we have to talk about Flexbox. So we're not there yet. The only other things really to show you here is that you don't have to use a UL and an LI and an anchor tag. This was the standard, it still is. In Bootstrap, if you look at older versions of nav bars in particular, this is the markup you'll see the most often. But we can also do it with something a little bit shorter right here, where we just do a nav with a class equals nav and then anchor tags without even bothering with the LIs or the ULs. So if I just copied this one over, I won't make you watch me type the whole thing, you'll see that it looks exactly the same, except for the fact that the text is different. Okay, so the last two things I'm going to show you here have to do with tabs and pills. And these are super simple additions. All you have to do, if we just take this, one of our first navs, I'll put a little H3 in here that just says tabs. If you go to the nav and give it a class of nav tabs, this class right here, it now changes to look like this, where whatever is active is the currently selected tab. So if I move that over, let's do the second one, it looks good. I should note, if you're using this more abbreviated syntax, which I'll also bring down here, if you try and do nav tabs like this, and then this one, which already has the active class, it's slightly different. This underline goes all the way through versus, I should add some space in here. I don't know, I'll just put some random text in there for now. You can see the difference. This is a more natural looking tab. This has a full box around it. You can fix that by also giving these each a class of nav item. And now we don't have that problem. And then the other look that we can go with are pills. So we use nav-pills, It's the same exact HTML, so I'm just going to copy this, move it down here, and just change it to say pills, and change nav tabs to be nav-pills. And it's just a different look. So we end up with this, and whatever has the active class, and it can be more than one thing, it just doesn't really make sense. But you would do this with JavaScript. And there is a plugin that will actually help you do this. So the rest of this is about positioning them. We're going to come back to that in the next video, making them take up space, flex utilities. But down at the bottom where we have these tabs, we're going to come back to this because it does involve using some of the JavaScript that we haven't talked about yet. You don't actually have to write JavaScript, but there's some extra markup. So we'll come back to that. For now, we're just talking about the basics of tabs, pills, just the ideas, the active class. And then next, we're going to talk about how you position them. And then after that, we're going to move to nav bars. So to wrap that up, navs are pretty simple. There's a nav class, there's a nav item class, and a nav link class. Keep that in mind because soon, when we take a look at nav bars, you'll see some of that similar markup. Nav item, nav link.